Hello, how's it going? So I came here today to do a video for this week for the museum channel. I was trying to think about what to do, and I figured, oh, actually there's quite a bit to talk about. So it's a bit more of a talk about things kind of video, so I hope you don't mind. Where shall we start? Right, first off, so the museum opened last year, straight after lockdown. I think it was the first week that you could open, weekend, you could open somewhere like this, and it was open up to the end of October. And then after October, it was open once or twice a month in the winter times, and now it's back in season nearly. So from Easter we'll be open nearly every weekend from the 16th of April. We're actually going to be matching the opening times because the Ramsgate Micro Museum, which is a really good local computer museum, it's pretty much next door. We're going to sort of sync up timings, so if you come along you get double the museum whammy as it goes. So I think it's definitely worth coming down because there's like two museums next to each other. It's like Museum Street. We're doing away with all of the Eventbrite pre-booking things, so you just turn up when the opening times, pay at the door and pop on in. It's all a bit of an experimentation. The days and times may change a little bit throughout, so if you're planning ahead and you're planning to come from abroad or something and you want to come here, then maybe plan for Sundays or fire an email over and have a chat that way, but just double check on the website because there's a couple of dates when we won't be open. So currently in between a few projects at the minute, just trying to get a few done in time for the next open day, which is now going to be the 16th, and then weekends. Oh, it'll be quite interesting. The first thing is MarkNet, a supporter on my Patreon, came over on this Saturday when we were open with the beginning of a Cosmo, a dialer Cosmo. Cosmo being the robot, animatronic ping pong eye robot that I make here, there and everywhere. But the idea is with this machine is it uses the Bordeaux code, which is through the telephone lines, to actually talk to an AI sort of program, Mega HAL if you've heard of it, and it talks to it and you type in, it chats, it thinks for a bit and then sends it back. Currently it's just a Raspberry Pi, some LEDs wired into a telephone, so it just answers the phone and then you're able to talk to it over the phone and it replies to you. But that's going to be one of the projects next week, is actually building it into a actual Cosmo robot that's wired straight into the telephone exchange, so it like thinks and moves and goes it's going to be amazing. So that's one of the projects. And then also talking about telephone exchanges is Will is coming over in the next week or two with a big box, basically a computer tower, that is going to mean that we can plug the phone lines out of the phone line for this place. We're getting a telephone number sorted and then plugged in to the telephone exchange. So that means you will be able to call from externally when the museum is open. So that means you can either call the synthesizers when they're wired up. Some of them are wired up so far. You can call all of the answering machines that are currently wired up, including the announcer 9A and things like that. And you can call any of the phones in the museum. So if people pick it up, you know, you can chat to them. So that is one of the things. It's going to be a huge system. Currently, it's wired up to allow 4 different lines at once. There's a little bit of a problem. I'm probably only going to be first wiring it up to 2 reserved lines because it's going to go straight through the UAX13 Rack A. I'm currently on the hunt. It's very unlikely, but I'm on the hunt for another UAX13 Rack A because I think it just will alleviate all of the traffic a bit, because I have a feeling a lot's going to be used at once. There's the way it's wired up is a little bit more about dialing numbers than traffic, so I'm on the hunt for another one. So if anybody's looking at one in the garage or something and they're hoping to get rid, please let us know, because I'd love to do a deal on something like that. There's also the plan of live streaming the actual telephone exchange, so you can call in on, let's say, your smartphone, type in with the dual tone frequency thing, it transfers over to the pulse kind of code, so it can call. But then hopefully, this isn't going to be straight away, but it'll have a live stream pointing at it, so that's pretty cool. So the museum is nowhere near done. I don't think it's ever going to be done. I've said that a lot in all of the videos, but there are about 3 or 4 rooms at the back that still are not organised or finished, and there's still a plan to actually expand to make it a bit bigger here and there. And one of the rooms, which I did eyeball initially initially as being more of a computer music room. We'll talk about that at some point. That room is going to actually be the test equipment lab. Test equipment has been something I've sort of been holding off because it's not the most user-friendly stuff to have in an interactive working museum. The thing is test equipment, much like this one and something like this, was never really made for any Tom, Dick and Harry to use. They would be used in labs and stuff, and people would have had some sort of training to use them. So they're not really set up to be actually that helpful. And I've got a little taste of how it might go a bit wrong with the modular synthesizers that are set up, including the Digisound and the Formant, and then the Cosmo and the other homemade one. The thing is that initially when the museum's open, it's wired up in a way that it matches the description on the front. So there's a couple of knobs here and there with green dots on them. So you twist them, they do stuff. You get a kind of taste for modular synths. However, the problem is then this is completely encouraged to do so. Is if people want to repatch them and try them out, actually how they are, it's great for them to do that. It's great. So then it starts moving away from the original description. So people who don't fully understand modular synthesis, and it's not immediately obvious, for looking at for 10 minutes and trying to figure out, it might end up getting a little bit confusing. And I haven't really figured out a solution yet for that to keep everybody happy, but still offer a modular synthesizer to use. It's a little bit weird. Don't get me started on the Game Boy Mega Machine. That was never built with being interactive in mind, and it's that thing's gonna be. I need to rethink about how to make that interactive, because that's one of the next projects in the next few weeks. It's going to finally hit to finish that thing. But the modular synthesizers, what happens is throughout the day, people who know what they're doing, which is great, and I fully encourage it, plugging things in. It gets a little bit different, but it still works at least. There's still a few knobs that do things that have still got green dots on, so people who don't really know how to use it still get a feel for it. But then there's people, which is fine, who just willy-nilly plug outputs into outputs, this, that and the other, and it's all good. It's all about discovery, but it's over time, throughout the day, it just ends up stopping making noises because they're not plugged into anything. It's just doing nothing, and then people come and look at it later on in the day and they're like, what? So plus the other fact is modular synthesizers, they're all labeled in different ways, especially the older ones, the older DIY ones. They weren't really built supremely, they weren't really designed completely with user friendliness in mind as much as a commercial item, purely because they were built DIY. They were a bit more unique and a bit more cottage industries, and so the labels are all very different. For instance, on the Digisound 80, some of those labels don't make a sense at all. Like, there is a printout of what it all means. However, it's still a lot of reading. There's a lot of weighing up and a lot of figuring out. But I went off on a tangent about modular synths. But this problem is amplified with a test equipment setup. The test equipment setup is even more confusing because you're using something that has somewhat kind of sensical descriptions of what things do in a test equipment manner, but you're using them in a different way for music. So figuring out the nuances of it all can get a little bit tedious. So the plan is with this room it's actually quite the perfect shape to set up the whole setup with a mixer and things like that, and then people can get in contact prior and mention that they're interested in using that room, and then people can peek their head in whilst you're messing around with it, and it's a bit more of a one person and the machine whilst the museum's open, because if it's anybody can go up, it would just end up into a mush. But then the other thing is, if nobody comes forward and wants to do that or discover it for a couple, for whilst it's open, or indeed in Residencies, we'll chat about that in a little bit, is there'll be set up a mixer at the front so you can bring up certain sounds that are within that room. I think that's a good idea. all of this has been put off for the last year or so because I've been, I've only got two hands. I've been setting up all this museum. It's just so much to sort out, and it's going to be such a slow burner to build up these things. But this is one of the things for summer, is sorting out that room, because there's a lot of equipment that needs plugging in to work. Talking about that, this is something that happened in the weekend as well. There was a Patreon meet and greet with Heimbach and Cuckoo on the Sunday. It was just a little thing. People came around. Heimbach and Cuckoo were here, so people had a chat, and it was nice because support on Patreon is a very big contributing factor to this place. It just makes something like this actually possible, which I don't know how else it would be. We're trying to look into other things of making it a bit bigger, and also looking for some sort of funding to try and open a bit more often, but that's a whole other kettle of fish. But right now it's just like, it is funded by support on Patreon, so we're trying to be as open as possible and all that stuff, and just make it as cool of an experience if you come as possible. But it all comes with time. It all comes with time, because it's a lot of work. For instance, the detune knob on the 1000 oscillator Mega Drone, finally, that's pretty good. Cuckoo left the day before Heimbach, so me and Heimbach decided to put together a landfill totem, which is basically a stag of test equipment, wire it into a mixer and just let it do its thing. And it made me realize that, it can actually be set up in a kind of interactive manner, but it doesn't have to be as hands-on as the modular synths, because it would just be a nightmare. So there may be some landfill totems that will have mixing desks and stuff. The reason I pulled this one out is because I'm going to start documenting these ones video by video. I'm taking this back to my flat because it's the first one that I'm going to be doing a little video on. I'm going to plug it into Cosmo and just make it do things, because this is actually really interesting. And this video might be up in the next few days because it's quite exciting. And then do it bit by bit, wire it up, and just see how it goes. But we talked about residencies. I'm jumping around here. So residencies are something that I want to look into offering here, starting in spring and stuff. For instance, the first one is by a local musician called Clementine Blue, and she is coming in the middle of April at some point. It's going to be a bit of a test, coming for a couple of days to make some sounds, hopefully capture some videos for the channel and stuff. But if you're interested in coming along and trying, maybe spending a day or something recording, or a day or two, it's up to you. Maybe the 1000 oscillator Mega Drone, maybe the Digisound or something like that, or things that are currently set up, then please get in contact below. But anyway, like I said, from the 16th we'll be open every weekend. On the 16th and 17th we're open at the same times as the Micro Museum. Keep looking at the dates, definitely on Sundays, except for the ones that are, just check the website. But yeah, that was a lot of blab. I hope some of that made sense. Anyway, have a lovely time. Toodly-doo.